So I'm going to start with a bigger question that I know a lot of people ask, maybe internally, but not out loud. And that's why the United States doesn't just resolve the Israel and Iran problem. There's an assumption most people don't even realize they're carrying. And it's not political, it's not ideological, it's almost childhood level simple. If someone is strong enough, eventually they should be able to stop the problem. Not manage it, not delay it, but stop it completely. And when people think of strength, real strength, their mind usually lands in one place: the United States. They have the largest military budget in the world, bases all across the world, technology no one else can match, logistics that can move an army across oceans. So the question forms naturally and almost innocently: why doesn't the US just end this? Why does this keep dragging on? Why does it feel like everyone else is stuck, but the strongest player in the world won't step in and close this chapter? That confusion isn't naive, it's actually reasonable. But before I answer it, something has to be separated. There's a difference between having power and using power without inheriting consequences. Most people blend those together, but the US can't do that. So here's the shift in perspective so you can understand this. It's small, but it's important. The United States can destroy almost anything it targets, but what it cannot control is what exists afterwards. That doesn't sound dramatic, but it's the entire reason nothing gets resolved. When people imagine the United States resolving this, they usually picture something clean: a decisive strike, airstrikes, they neutralize the threat, a clear message is sent, and order gets restored. But that picture comes from the older wars. Wars where enemies were centralized, borders were clear, and victories were visible. But this conflict doesn't live in one place. It lives in systems. And systems don't collapse cleanly. They fragment. So, what ending it would actually look like is this: to actually resolve it, not symbolically and not rhetorically, but structurally, the US would have to do more than just attack Iran. What the US would have to do is it would have to remove the existing power structure. Then it would have to prevent internal collapse from turning into chaos, which we've seen, for example, in Libya or in Syria. Then they would have to manage the regional spillover because there's going to be people trying to flee the country, looking for a better life and to get out of the situation. Then they have to contain proxy fragmentation and also guarantee a replacement that doesn't recreate the same problem. That's not a military operation, that's ownership. And ownership is the one thing the US is trying to avoid. Now, there's a reason American strategy changed over time. Not because the military got weaker, but because the lessons got heavier. The United States learned something the hard way in the past. You can remove a government from power faster than you can replace legitimacy. You can win the opening act, but you'll lose the next 20 years. Once that realization sets in, just ending it stops sounding like strength and starts sounding reckless. Another thing people rarely pause on and think about is the US doesn't operate in one region. It operates everywhere. Every major action in the Middle East pulls on threads elsewhere: energy markets, alliances, trade routes, strategic rivals watching closely. So when people ask why the US doesn't fully focus here, the answer is this: because it can't afford to be owned by any single conflict. Now, this is where people's reactions begin to differ. Not because they disagree on facts, but because they interpret power differently. Some people believe power must be demonstrated. If you don't act, then you look weak. Others believe that power is about deterrence. You don't need to act as long as everyone knows you could. And then there's a third posture that's less satisfying and quieter. Power is something you can ration, something you conserve, something you don't spend unless the return is clear. That's where the US sits right now. A full-scale United States move wouldn't end one conflict. It would unlock several at once. You would have regional escalation, asymmetric retaliation, cyber and economic responses, long-term instability, and permanent responsibility of the situation. The initial strike would be the smallest part. The aftermath would be the actual war. So here's the mental mindset that you need so that way you can understand this. The United States is no longer trying to win conflicts. It's trying to avoid being consumed by them. That sounds unsatisfying because it is, but it's also rational. From the outside, the United States' behavior looks inconsistent, present but not decisive, involved but not committed, powerful, obviously, but restrained. That's not indecision, that's calibrated ambiguity. Enough force to deter collapse, enough distance to avoid ownership, enough involvement to influence outcomes, not enough to inherit them. Now, let's step back and let's look at this pattern. We already talked about Iran. We know Iran avoids full war because losing threatens the regime. We know that Israel avoids full war because winning could destabilize the state. Now we see that the United States avoids full resolution because owning the outcome would drain global power. 3 different actors, 3 different fears, but the same exact behavior. Now you might ask, why does this leave everyone dissatisfied? And it's simple, because people want closure. They want a moment where something ends and they can say, that's the end of the war. That's done now. But modern geopolitics doesn't reward closure. It rewards endurance, stability without resolution, control without victory, pressure without release. So the conflict continues, not because the US is incapable, but because the most dangerous move it can make right now is the one that feels final. In this system, decisiveness looks like a solution, but it behaves like a trap. And that's why nothing gets resolved. Now, this is all of the major geopolitical conflicts that we're experiencing today. For example, with Russia and Ukraine. So in the next video, I'm going to dive into that conflict as well and paint the same picture so that way you understand it all.